Hello, everyone. I'll be talking about the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki um, during World War II. So, before I get into those two events, I will first give you some background. So, World War II was basically between two sets of forces, the Axis and the Allied forces. So, the Axis powers were basically led by Hitler, and his main people who supported him were Italy and Japan. And his entire ordeal was to conquer the entire world. And because of the amount of force that he showed and how he was very vicious and how he treated the Jews and how he treated his how how his military personnel came in and just like ravaged the entire not the entire but a good portion of Europe, the the formation of the Allied forces came to be. And so those Allied forces consisted of England, France, the Soviet Union, and the United States. There were others, but those are the four big countries that were involved. Um, and so towards the end of the war, all the European Axis powers, Germany and Italy, were subdued. They were defeated and whatnot. However, Japan was the only Axis power still left standing, and they were in the Pacific, and that is where the U.S. was too, and they were fighting very hard. And Japan, as they saw that the Japan was like, I'm gonna fight to the very bitter end, and through that, many U.S. soldiers and other Allied forces they died too in that because their assaults from the Japanese assaults became more volatile. And so they had, for instance, they had an attack called kamikaze where they would get into fighter jets and they would purposely crash themselves into the Allied forces jets and thus killing themselves and their opponent at the same time. And that was very dangerous, and a lot of many Allied soldiers died from that. And so, the president of the United States at the time, Harry Truman, he decided um, he decided to go with the choice of dropping the atomic bomb. Originally, um, the original plan, which was to just continue to assault Japan with bombs and then do a massive large scale invasion on their territory. However, because the United States forces was so depleted, that was not an option and that would just be suicide in itself. And so President Truman, despite the more reservations of his colleagues, the Secretary of War and General Dwight Eisenhower, he decided to drop it because he wanted to end this war quickly and just get it over with. And so on August 6, 1945, the American forces dropped the first atomic bomb in history on Hiroshima, Japan. And 80,000 people died, and 90% of that city was destroyed. However, Emperor Hirohito of Japan would not relent, and so they dropped another bomb on August 9th, 1945, on Nagasaki. Originally, the place was supposed to be Kokura, but Kokura had a cloud over it, and so they had to move to Nagasaki in order to do that. And with that, that atomic bomb was much more heavier. It weighed 10,000 pounds in comparison to the previous bomb on Hiroshima, which weighed about 9,000 pounds. And so through that attack, 40,000 people died. Because of the effects of it, the Emperor Hirohito, he decided to lament, not lament, to relent, and he ended the war. So the war was ended. However, the effects were just so grievous, and that was another reason why the emperor decided to give in. And so some of the effects were, so basically, out of the entire bombing, 240,000 people perished. 120,000 died because of the blast, and then the rest, most of the people died from injuries and sickness that was caused by radiation. A contributing factor to this devastating effect was that 90% of the medical personnel were either killed or disabled, and so they could not help the wounded and those who were in critical condition. In addition, the medical supplies ran out, and the radiation sickness, particularly the one in the radiation sickness affected civilians um, for decades. And so a lot of people were born with birth defects, suffered from cancer, um, and had tumors. And then, and so now I'm going to move on to the importance. Um, this, the devastation of this bomb and the fact that the President Harry Truman, decided to drop that bomb is of important significance for a couple of reasons. First, primarily, as I stated before, it ended the world wars, and it also put the U.S. as the most powerful country in the aftermath of World War II because they had an atomic bomb, they had the weapons and the means to do that. And so, because of that, now they basically had this invincible status because of the type of weaponry that they owned. And as shown with the devastation that happened in um, Japan in the two cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that proved that the United States is not a country or to be messed with. Um, Also, it was the first time that anyone has ever used a nuclear um, weapon on another country. And another significance, not a significance, but one thing that came out of this entire um, ordeal was that there's a lot of mixed reviews. Um, some people just didn't agree with it because of just how devastating the effects were on the civilians and on their future generations. I mean, like total, the place was basically wiped. The cities were basically wiped out, and the people had nothing left to really treat themselves and to get the proper treatment at that time. And even though it was supposed to end the war, the people think that there could have. That some people think that there should have been a different way. However, um, others still think that it needed to be done. I mean, Japan was not going to stop. It was going to continue to the very end, and our soldiers were tired, and people just wanted to go home to their families and just call it a day and just end this madness. And so there, with this kind of decision, with this kind of decision that President Truman made, came these two opposing, conflicting sides still to this day. And that is it. I hope this presentation helped you a lot.